It's Season 2 of the Regal Draft League. The Welsh Woobats are coming off an incredibly disappointing Season 1, finishing with a 2-6 record, missing the playoffs, and deciding to completely skip the grudge bracket. So, coming into Season 2, expectations are low, but pressure is on to improve, to learn from Season 1, build on it, to lay the foundations for a dynasty the likes of which has never been seen in draft. So what did we learn from Season 1? Balance. I completely lost track of the typings of my squad during the draft and gave myself a pretty big handicap going into the actual season, approaching it like standard VGC. With my admittedly limited experience in Pokemon overall, and all of that experience coming from playing in a format that allows the use of all available Pokemon, it was always going to happen. But for Season 2, I need to remember that I don't have to face Flutter and Urshifu every single match, so I can be way more flexible in my draft. Not accounting for the tech. Follows on nicely from the previous point. Last season I was only able to see how my opponent's mons and my own mons would typically be used, not how they could be used in the upcoming battle. So for Season 2, starting with the draft, I need to look for the tech options that could round out my team and make it more difficult for my opponents. I also need to look for the tech options in my opponent's squads during prep, limiting surprises and making battles a little bit easier. Decision making. This was initially aimed at in-battle decision making, needing to keep calm, make timely decisions, not take too long when under pressure, and not locking in too quickly when things are going well. But this also applies to the draft, making good decisions on draft picks, not focusing on comfort picks, not getting flustered when I get sniped. This will give me a better squad going into the season and make things much easier on me. So, Season 2. What is there to say about Season 2 that I haven't said already in the videos that preceded this? It's overall been a resounding success. My improvement as a team builder, as a player, is quite literally here for all to see. Finishing the season 5-4, making the playoff, is night and day from Season 1. Throw in the fact that I attended my first regional. At that regional, I'd started 3-1, then succumbed to exhaustion and drop at 3-4. Still, I started 3-1, and it was then inexperience in that environment that caused my downfall. I entered 3 online tournaments and only went negative in one of them. I'm pretty impressed with myself there. To some, the non-draft competitions have no real connection, but honestly, without the help of the other coaches in the league, through Season 1, through Season 2, I not only wouldn't have entered any of those competitions, I also wouldn't have done anywhere near as well as I did. I said it at the end of last season. The amount I learn week on week, competing in this league, chatting in the Discord, is incredible. So I absolutely link the outside of the league performances to the league. So let's dive a bit deeper, starting with the draft. Now, of course, I've made a full video going over my draft. I'm not going to go over it in its entirety here. I'll link that video in the description. Go watch it if you haven't. But to recap what I said at the start of the video. 1. Speed isn't as important in draft, but you have to be mindful of it. 2. Draft your high cost mons late. 3. Look for great lower tier value. 4. Setup is huge. Now, looking back over the season, do stand by these 4 points. You can absolutely have a successful season following these rules. However, what I learned during the season is that this doesn't take your play style or the team style into account. Take me for example. I prefer to play hyper offense. Speed is incredibly important in that archetype. Not only natural speed, but the ability to get speed control and deny your opponent's speed control. So having, for example, a prankster tailwind, a faster tailwind setter, or a guaranteed trick route is an absolute must in hyper offense. But if you're leaning more towards a balanced style or a bulky offense, then you don't need to focus on your speed control. You can leave those picks till later in the draft. Be far more flexible with your options there. The same goes for draft your high cost mons late. And yes, it's kind of common sense or stating the obvious, but if you know there's a big difference between your first choice for a role and your second choice, then guaranteeing that pick by selecting it early is 10,000% worth it. So if your team, for example, really needs Chi Yu as a special attacking fire type that's going to buff your other special attackers, then if you think someone will pick it before it gets to the later rounds, if you're looking at an opponent's draft board and you're thinking, it really looks like they're going to want Chi Yu there, take it. Don't wait. Don't let it get sniped. Take it early. Main priority should be getting the core of your team built. There's not much point taking Walking Wake as a Sun Sweeper if you haven't already got a Sun Setter. Sounds like common sense, but I'm fairly sure it's happened to someone before. And this also ties in to the look for lower tier value. If you see a mon that fits your team perfectly and it's, say, 2 or 3 cost, it's probably worth securing that pick pretty early in the draft just to be sure you get it. You don't know what mons the rest of the league are looking at. Somebody else could have looked at that Pokemon for very similar reasons to you, may value it as high, if not higher than you do. So if you miss out, it's going to scupper the rest of your draft. So let's take a look at the Woobats draft for the season. This was the squad we drafted. Again, I'm not going to repeat everything I said about my draft prep here. At the time, I was really pleased with how it went, and looking back, I'm still pretty pleased, to be honest. I planned well, I came up with a game plan. For the most part, I stuck to it. I pivoted okay when my top picks were sniped, and even managed to grab some extra pretty cool tech options. What was I looking for? There were 4 key things I wanted in my squad. I was looking for weather control, prankster support, versatile sweepers, and either haze or Clear Smog. I think I hit 3 out of the 4 points dead on with my draft. Ninetales and Sableye gave me weather control. Sableye is of course extra support, and Empoleon has haze. The thing I missed on was versatile sweepers, and if I'm being brutally honest with myself, I missed by quite a wide margin. Tusk, I wasn't really happy about initially, but it turned out to be really versatile. Yes, I ended up using a lot of Scar sets throughout the season, but that was because I wanted to use it more aggressively, and Tusk doesn't have the best speed stat. Why I leaned more into Scarf than other options for that will become a bit more clear later. Despite that, I still had Assault Vest sets, booster sets, choice band sets. I even had a couple of bulk up leftover sets that I'd come up with. I just never used them in matches. So what came to the matches didn't really show Tusk's versatility. Gardevoir was also surprisingly versatile as a sweeper. It's not something I used her for in Season 1. But in Season 2, I used Specs, Life Orb, Calm Mind, and while Guardy didn't get a ton of kills, he was an amazing flex piece that was able to deal damage and put on pressure. But if you look at the rest of my draft, where was the damage? Como could have been good in a different team. It is strong, it is versatile, but I had no idea how to support it with the pieces I drafted. It was a late round pick, so I could easily have looked at what I already had, realize it wasn't the best pick, even though I wanted a dragon type. Moltres has a high enough special attack stat, doesn't have good coverage. Empoleon is a decent bulky piece, but isn't going to win games by itself, even though it did technically win one game by itself. Shiftry needed setup, so it's not versatile. On paper, none of them were bad picks. Moltres was my speed control. Empoleon was my bulky water type. Neither of these was supposed to be sweepers. Como and Shiftry were intended to be sweepers, and they both turned out to be terrible picks. I did address the problem with 2 traits, Volcarona and Salamence, both of which have multiple options for sweeping and can win matches by themselves if positioned correctly. Probably the biggest regret of the draft though was Shiftry. I saw it as a good utility piece that could be fun and I could catch people off guard with, but I massively overestimated what it could do. In all of my prep, it just did nothing. Even though I didn't end up using it, Morpeko performed better in prep than Shiftry. It just always seemed to need a ton of setup to get the big KOs I wanted, but it just doesn't have the bulk to get it off without a lot of support. Now, I don't know if that's just me not being great with setup mons, but I could just never get it to do what I wanted. Obviously, I couldn't really have predicted this pre-draft, with me never having used Shiftry before, So you live and learn, I guess. The draft turned out pretty much as planned, to be honest. Like I said, I pivoted pretty well when I missed out on some of my top picks, and I managed to grab some very, very cool ones to bring the tech. However, there were still some massive issues with my management of the type chart. Again, I had 5. Yep, you heard that correctly. 5 fairy weaknesses. 5 flying weaknesses. And 4 ground weaknesses. I had switch-ins for the fairy attacks, so I kinda covered for those, but flying and rock were a massive problem, and I didn't make these any better with the trades. And this leads pretty well into battles. Points I had to work on from last season: decision making and being less hard on myself. And I think I've improved a lot on both. I'm still terrible at praising myself, but for once I'm going to. As a player, the difference from season 1 to season 2 is massive. I have improved so much in so many aspects of the game. I still need to work on my positional play, but that will improve more as my knowledge of the individual Pokemon improves. If you look at my loss to Tommy, I underestimated the damage output of Florges. Lack of knowledge about that Pokemon cost me the game. Of course, it's Tommy. There were hacks involved. There always is. But if I'm not underestimating Florges, I may not be switching in Woshen. It's then not dying, and I'm in a much better spot to potentially go on and lose to more hacks. My other 4 losses on the season. Versus TCL, I definitely threw by not making sure I terrored Como, but it was a close match. TCL played incredibly well, so even with that terror, I may still have lost. So I can't be too unhappy with it. I got outplayed. Versus Twim, and in both matches versus Otter, I got straight up outbuilt. Otter, in particular, has probably forgotten more about Pokemon than I know. Twim at least plays and builds like a far more experienced player than I am. So I can't be hard on myself for playing well and losing to players that are far more experienced than me, and though it's not a guarantee that with experience comes ability, but in this case they are far more experienced than me and therefore better than me. Certainly with TCL, I feel like I pushed that match all the way. In game 2 of the match versus Twim, you can see where my good prep came in, how much that side of the game has improved for me. What caught me off guard was them recognizing potential win condition of setup overquill, and me not seeing that win condition of setup overquill. So experience, ability to identify a win condition. The 2 matches versus Otter, yeah, if I'd remembered Taunt, Roaring Moon from the first match, the second match would have played out a lot differently. I'd probably still lose, because Otter's just a better player than I am, and I'm not afraid to admit it. But I wouldn't have got blown out so hugely if I'd remembered that. Unlike last season, I've not done any post-battle analysis. Part of that has been time thing with wanting to speed up the process of getting the battle videos out, but also leaning into that point of not wanting to be too hard on myself. And not wanting to be hard on myself, I don't want to go back and pick holes in a victory. I just want to enjoy the moment and then move on to the next game. And I decided to take that approach to defeats as well. I don't want to dwell on them. I don't want to be hard on myself for them. I want to look at them, see the mistakes I made, make a mental note of what they were and how to improve, and then move on. The only real complaint I have about Season 2 was the fact that I didn't play to my strengths. Season 1, I tried to play to my strengths, but drafted really badly. Season 2, drafted pretty well, but I didn't play to my strengths. What I drafted was more of a Sun balance team than an aggressive Sun team. I like weather teams. I like prankster supports. But I'm an offense player. I like my teams to go first, go fast, hit hard. I'm not good at balance. I'm not good at setup. I do okay with those as modes, as options within the team, but the team, the squad at its base should be hyper offense. That supports allowing hard hitting damage dealers to go faster and hit even harder, trading pieces effectively to win. Now, you might look at the squad and go, well, you had multiple tailwind options. You had your pranks to support. You could make your damage dealers go fast and hit harder. But just as I overestimated Shiftry, I overestimated Moltres. I drafted Moltres as my tailwind set. I had no confidence in Moltres. Or, to be honest, after the trade in Salamence as my speed control options. Moltres with the 90 speed just didn't ever feel like it would be fast enough to enable the rest of my team to play the way I wanted. Salamence was slightly better in that regard, being 10 points faster, but everyone seemed to have something faster than it that could hit it really hard. At least Sally brought the utility of Intimidate and the option of being a physical or special attacker. So even if I didn't lead it, I could bring it in later for an Intimidate and then potentially get off a mid or late game tailwind. But that isn't my style. It's too passive. So I struggled to use it effectively. That leads into one of the other issues I had with the team, and that was the speed tiers. I just didn't have the speed stats in my mons to do what I wanted, to play the way I like to. This had its positives. It forced me into, once again, switching up my playstyle quite a bit, to play a bit more passive, to make reads and calls that I don't normally have to make. After trading for Volk, it got a little easier because in a few games Volk enabled me to play more on the front foot, play more aggressively, from the off, from frame one, forcing my opponent to react to me rather than sitting back and allowing my opponent to dictate play. Even with Volk though, I just didn't feel like I had the team to do this consistently, especially if you combine that with the weaknesses I drafted. It all really narrowed what I was able to do in team building. If I'd taken something, for instance, other than Shiftry or Komao, it may have solved some of the issues. Because I drafted Shiftry earlier, and because Shiftry in theory fit the team better than Komao, I should have taken something other than Komao. I also, when I was looking at Moltres as my Tailwind setter, have looked at the type chart, looked at the speed tiers, and seen, you know what, I don't think Moltres is going to be fast enough, and pivoted to a different Tailwind setter, which would have then given me probably a bit more flexibility when it came to the Komao pick. I am pleased with my performance overall. I mean, how could you not be happy with getting 5 wins and making playoffs after the season 1 that I had? And I learned a lot once again. Still got points to work on, sure, but who doesn't? And I think for me, they all come under the umbrella of consistency. Being more consistent in my prep and team building. Being more consistent in my decision making in matches. Beyond that, I made mistakes in probably every single game. But I'm not going to sit here beating myself up about it. Everyone makes mistakes. It's happen, especially if you're playing Tommy. It's frustrating as hell, but dwelling on them after a super positive season will not only take away from what I think is a success story, but also potentially make me overthink and overanalyze errors that were pretty small in the big picture of the season. And that consistency point is a nice segue into content creation, which is another area where I kind of need to be a bit more consistent. I need to be more consistent in my process, creating and uploading the videos for my battles and for the weekly reviews. If I can be more consistent, get the videos up on same or similar days every week. Like, say, I have my battle on a Sunday, so I aim to have battle video up on Tuesday, and then I aim to get the weekly review up on Friday. This will help me to have more time for prep, set times for prep, and it'll hold me accountable and give me a goal, something that I know I have to work for. And something that's been mentioned to me by other content creators is having that consistency, having that schedule where people know when to expect your videos, your streams, your content will help your channel grow. And I'd like to think that helping my channel grow will help the league grow, which will give us more content, more growth, more fun. The other thing that having these set days and having this potential for extra time will allow me to make more non-draft content. I don't want to put a ton of pressure on myself to create more content, but I would like to work on challenge stuff, Nuzlocks, themed runs through Pokemon games, which do take a long time to record and edit. But with the length of time it's taken me to get these 2 videos up every week, I'm just not wanting to work on these things. I think with a little bit more consistency, a bit more routine, I can not only commit to doing this, but ultimately have fun with it. So what does this mean for Season 3? I want to play to my strengths. I want my team to be fast. I want my team to be aggressive. And I want to be the one dictating play. If my squad is designed to reflect my play style and play the way all of my teams in the past have, that should mean an improve again next season. It'll help my team building, it'll help my prep, it'll help my decision making in battles, because I'm not having to think so hard and so outside of my box every single week. We go back to what I said at the beginning of Season 1. I looked at the teams that I'd built going into Reg B, Reg C, Reg D. And if you look at what I built for Reg E, Reg F, my regionals team, they're all very aggressive. They put on a ton of pressure from turn 1. I think my regionals team is actually probably the perfect example. You look at that and I can lead Tornadus Fluttermane, I can lead GU Fluttermane, Walking Wake Tornadus. Those lead options put on so much pressure, they're so aggressive from the outset that your opponent is on the back foot from team preview, because what beats Flutterchi, what beats Torn Walking Wake, they're not the same thing. That's the sort of thing I need to be looking at for Season 3. That sort of play style. This is going to start with the draft, making sure I plan it out correctly. And this time, instead of doing multiple team variations like I did last season, I need to plan one team, one squad that does everything I need, but then have multiple options for each spot. That way the draft plays out almost like a flowchart, branches off with each pick. That's really going to help my brain with the draft. It's still going to end up with a lot of teams being built just to check the type charts and things like speed tiers, bulk, all just to make sure that the team is still hitting the points that it needs to, but they won't be vastly different to each other. So it's not going to require a massive amount of planning like last season did. And it's probably going to be a lot more fun plan out than last season was. But I can sit here for another hour talking through ideas I've got for Season 3. So with this, a really successful season for the Woobats has come to an end. We don't right now have a start date for Season 3, but we do know it'll be under Reg F, which adds even more Pokemon that I've got zero experience in using. It's a really intimidating list with so many options, so many strong Pokemon available. It's also got so many cool Pokemon that outside of draft I'll probably never get to use. So yes, it's super scary. Oh my god, it's exciting.